Yeah, so each system for 500 drones has one remote control. So we have a mission controller that's looking after the computer side, managing the whole drone swarm. Then we have a backup pilot, so we call that pilot in command. And any drones that are having any issues, that pilot can flick the switch, or automatically the computer hands over control to the pilot, and they can then flick the switch to take manual control of that drone and fly it home.
G'day everyone, and welcome to episode 138 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. G'day, I'm your host, Trent Robinson. Thank you for joining me. Really great episode today. Very interesting episode, which we'll introduce you to in just a moment. But have you been looking at Dan Bolton's Instagram? I am jealous, and he knows it. All right, that mellow guy, if you're not on there, go check it out. Dan is over in Vancouver at the moment having the time of his life. If you're an aerosexual, anything to do with aeroplanes, flying boats or whatever, he is living it up for all of us, and having some absolutely fantastic access to the Martin Mars in its final phase. As you're listening to this on Monday, the 12th of August, the aeroplane should be or had completed its final flight to the British Columbia Museum, and there'll be some amazing footage. The Snowbirds, the Canadian Formation Team, are going to be escorting the aircraft partway to its final destination. There's going to be boats, planes, formations, all sorts of stuff. It's just an incredible aeroplane. Something this big, we're just not going to see something like this again. So Dan will be covering it all on Instagram between his story and reels and video and stuff, and a couple of live streams he's done already. And no doubt when he gets back, I will get him on the podcast and we'll talk all about it. So definitely check that out. Some of you will know that I was the grateful, proud recipient of the Australian Flying Magazine's 2020 or 2023 CASA Wings Award for Flight Instructor of the Year, and the awards are open again for 2024. So if you have an instructor who you reckon is doing a cracker job, could be me again, or anyone else, Aero Club of the Year, GA Flying Training Organisation of the Year, Young Achiever of the Year, and the Colpaid Award for Lifetime Service to General Aviation. All those awards, the categories are on the Australian Flying Magazine website, and you can just Google the 2024 CASA Wings Awards, and I'll put the link in the episode description as well. And you can nominate somebody or an organisation for those awards, which are really great. And I think it's fantastic just to be recognised for people putting in the effort and really are trying to do good in our industry. And I'm spewing because I looked up the page and they're giving prizes for next year. But no, it's not about that. But some great prizes and some headsets and fuel vouchers and Garmin watch there. So definitely check that out. Links in the episode description. If you want to nominate someone and recognize their hard work, then please do so. All right, into today's episode, and a topic I wanted to cover for a while, and I'm very, very happy to be chatting to Chief Pilot and Chief Flight Instructor Nigel Brown from Autonomous Technology, and he's also part of Drone Sky Shows, who do all those amazing light displays. So we're going to talk about all things drones and how those displays work. So Nigel, mate, thank you for joining me and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to catch up again, Trent.
Definitely, buddy. Well, this is something I wanted to talk about for a while, as I've touched on every now and then. I have done a bit of drone instructing in the past, and I'll do more if there was some around, but I've got enough to do. But it is definitely a passion of mine and something I've really wanted to talk to you about. But before you do that, let's just talk about what got you interested in flying in the first place.
Yeah, it's sort of from a very young age, like most, the Top Gun generation and some of the big air shows that were happening in Perth at the time. And I was racing professional motocross at a young age, and our motocross club was lucky to have the RC helicopter club right next to it. So we used to, jump on the quad bike at lunchtime and ride across there and have a look at everything RC. And RC helicopters really, got my fancy up in an early stage, and I sort of said if I could afford it at that time. I was only young. I was 15. I'd get an RC helicopter and learn how to fly it during our summer motocross breaks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So how old were you when you took your first flying lesson?
RC or commercial?
No, pilot license. Yeah, real flying.
Real flying. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was sort of a journey. At 15, I flew RC. Flew that for quite a while around the world, competing in that events. And then I think I started flying when I was about 25, doing my private pilot's license.
Yeah, right. So you were making your own RC models and things, or using sort of off the shelf stuff, or just that doesn't cut it, I guess, in the competitive scene?
Yeah, so we started with, in the early days, I was sponsored by Miniature Aircraft, flying at that time the XL Stratus range of helicopters. And then we started working on the Synergy RC with Jason Krause, and then started flying for Synergy RC out of Hong Kong with Stephen Fan. And then as we progressed, we merged over to Align and started to work with the Align factory, doing some of their design work and testing. And then I was fortunate enough to get an investor on board, and we started our own helicopter factory in near Shenzhen in Dongguan, called TSA Helicopters, and we had a large range of our own models there for quite a number of years.
Unreal. And how, for those that haven't flown a RC helicopter before, I know the two bladers are a lot easier. That's all I've ever flown, but the single bladers are just a whole nother thing, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. The whole RC thing, taking yourself out of the cockpit, and doing it visually, I think is the first hardest thing. And back then when we started, it was flybar helicopters and ball trainer undercarriages and pretty poor gyros for tail rotors, and it was a real hands-on experience. And obviously with a helicopter, the first thing you learn is how to hover, and that's the hardest thing.
Yeah. So how is it then? So I've seen like you and Jerry and that just throw these things around and inverted just back and forward, skids to rotor almost. Just I don't even, if an inch off the ground's enough, it's probably less than that. But how many helicopters have you written off to get to that point of being able to control it like that? I can't fathom it.
Yeah, look, I was pretty fortunate in my career. I sort of always took the approach of flying that little bit higher for practice, and bringing it down and down and down and getting it closer to the ground over time for sort of the competition levels. So it was probably very rarely that I actually dumb thumb one and put it in the ground myself. Obviously with the helicopters, there's a few mechanical issues and they're going through a lot of stress, and you're doing testing of parts and components. So probably more mechanical failures than anything.
Do you find you have to just replace parts out of caution rather than wait for them to show signs, or you're going to lose one?
Yeah, definitely. We did a lot of preventative maintenance, because we were sort of, at that time in my career, I was flying, a gallon of nitro fuel a day, 4 litres a day, which was a fair bit of fuel. That time we were getting 44-gallon drums of fuel delivered for flying. So yeah, it was a lot of work for a little nitro engine and servos back in the day, but they actually were pretty robust. In all honesty, it was sort of the one thing that you maybe didn't replace that ended up having a lifetime that you didn't expect, that took it out of the sky. But again, it wasn't very common, and I'd say servos even back then, we didn't have much issues with electronics, going wrong. Definitely in that changeover from sort of 36 megahertz to 2.4 gigahertz, that really did change a lot of our lockouts and issues that we might have had at the club at the time.
Yeah, because that was always the problem, wasn't it? Like RC controllers had to be sort of on the desk, on the shelf in the back, because someone pulls out the wrong one and you're trying to control two and you'd lose it.
Yeah, the frequency card thing, or even one club was just doing these inverted hurricanes and flying it over the fence line. The fence line would actually knock out the data link and locked out one of our helicopters, and just sort of unforeseen things, that RF interference.
Just got to sit back, watch them cry.
Yeah. Ask your sponsors for more blades.
Yeah, exactly. And did you have like the whole PC simulator set up then, or
Yeah.
that's more of a recent
So,
thing?
yeah, I actually was fortunate to start the PC era really early with, I think it was Dave Brown's RC Radio Link at the time. It was a very crude arcade, like a Pac-Man helicopter simulator in a way back then. But it definitely did give you the scope to practice on your PC and learn how to hover and learn the four orientations of flight, sort of side on, nose in, and then figure of eights, and then sort of take that to learning it in all orientations from inverted forwards to inverted backwards, and then all the pirouetting events. And then the great thing was sort of real flight came along and put some really good graphics to the simulation, and we just sort of snowballed from there. But
Yeah, fantastic.
sims were a massive part. I'd spend hours a day at night time, practicing maneuvers and trying to perfect it there before even taking it onto the helicopter in the real world.
Yeah. And what's the sort of largest and smallest helicopters that you would use or fly size-wise? Because people won't know the model numbers. But
Yeah, so like for aerobatic helicopters, the largest ones we were flying there were like 700 size, so roughly a 1.45 meter rotor disc diameter.
it's decent size.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely do some damage. Um, yeah, so that was the go-to 700 aircraft.
Was there any slashed injuries and stuff from getting too close?
Yeah, touch wood, I ran from other people's helicopters, but I have never run from my own.
Good to hear.
Yeah, which was fortunate.
So then you, from the design point of view, like that was all, have you got any sort of engineering background there, or you just kind of just taught yourself and I guess you use CAD software for testing and
Yeah,
trial and error?
yeah. So probably like the history of how it evolved. Sort of my motocross career ended early from some injuries, that sort of compiled up when I got to around 19. At that point in time, my goal was I was at university at Curtin University, finishing a mechanical engineering degree, and my goal then was to finish my degree, go to America, and race motocross. But that didn't eventuate because of the injury.
19 years old, you're already written your body off.
Yeah, yeah, and that actually was a write-off from when I was 8, when I first started riding. The kid was
Oh
going
no.
backwards around the track, and we had a head-on collision, and broke the ball off my femur, and 3 months in hospital. And then it took
Oh
5
God.
years to convince the doctor to let me ride again, and so I really started racing.
And your mother.
Yeah, yeah. Mum and
Sorry,
dad.
Mum.
Yeah, so it was sort of 13 years to mid 19. My career sort of ended premature from that injury, and then I sort of was flying RC helicopters, and I took up skydiving at the time. And out at the skydiving club, we had a lot of time between jumps, and it was a good social. So I took my RC helicopter out there and did a lot of practice with it. And then while I was out there, I was just like, if I put as much time into RC heli flying as I did motocross, let's see where it goes. So yeah, did that, and then won a couple of Australian aerobatic RC helicopter championships. Then went to Europe, to UK, and competed in the world titles there, and took it over to America as well. So then I finished my engineering degree, and then started, as I was flying and competing nationally and globally, that putting input back into the designs of what we were flying, things that we were finding that were weak, or we could modify to make improvements in the flight dynamics of the helicopters. And then, sort of companies you were working with at the time sort of found out you were close to finishing your degree as an engineer and wanted to get you on board to develop new systems.
Oh, fascinating. And is there much of that sort of racing going on now, and competing, or is it more moved into like the drone championships and the racing drones that we see now?
Yeah, definitely. That helicopters sort of had its pinnacle, I'd say, probably 6 years ago, and it was really massive, and it was great to be a part of that explosion in that RC helicopter industry. And then it slowly did decline as sort of the FPV scene came up, that anyone could really have a chance to fly something, and the cost and the barrier to entry was really low on FPV as well. So sort of as helicopters had its peak, and then the FPVs came in and it declined. So yeah, FPV is now the sort of the biggest market, and diehards are left in the helicopters.
Yeah, the traditionalists, the purists.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, fantastic! All right, what got you then to convert your RC helicopter license into a real aircraft? Then you just piqued your interest in that, or?
Yeah, look, I always had a passion for flying, and it was really when we started doing autonomous technology and drone training. It was an opportunity to learn, the other side of aviation. Like, as we were having drone laws, at that early stage, we didn't have drone laws coming in.
Mm.
Sort of self-regulated in a way. But we were working on those laws with CASA to come out with a REOC and the REPL, and it was an opportunity then to see the aviation side, what we have to deal with in the air, and a passion there to get the ball rolling. That your private pilot's license in a way complements what you know and what you can train from a REPL drone training side. Snowballed, then like yourself, you get the bug, and you go from your Cessna 152 to 172 and then 172 RG and get your retract CSU. And I was an adrenaline junkie to start with. Was get your aerobatics rating and then get your low level endorsement. And then I was fortunate enough to get into purchasing some cattle stations and heading out there doing mustering with aircraft. And yeah, just trying to be proficient at something that you enjoy is really fun.
Yeah, it's absolutely so important, isn't it, to be able to maintain those standards, and I guess the same with drone flying as well. Like if you don't do it much, you start getting all nervous and twitchy, and there's all these skills you got to practice. So what then led to autonomous technology starting to become a flight school? Was it really when the concept became a thing with CASA? And
yeah, so we've been really capitalising on the market early on in the mining sector. We'd worked on our helicopter systems and converting those into large-scale aerial mapping drones. This is way before drones were drones. And we had some, contract with mining companies like Newcrest Mining, doing all their end of the month stockpile surveys and open pit surveys using photogrammetry. So we had a really good run there of putting drones into the industry and using them successfully as a service provider. And then slowly, as we started then working with CASA on the drone legislation, we could see that then drones were starting to become something in the industry. And then sort of with the DJI revolution, we could see that the adoption rate was a lot higher. And then surveying companies that we were subcontracting to were then looking to get into drones, and it was an opportunity. We had all the knowledge on how to do surveying and mapping with drones and how to build them and service them and operate them. So it was a sort of an expected transition to then help those guys to get their licenses and the knowledge on how to do what we were doing and, pass down what we had learned.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well, let's start talking about licensing for people to understand. So you've mentioned the term REOC and REPL, however you want to pronounce it. So do you want to just take everyone through that? And if someone wants to buy a drone, do they need a license? And what's the process there before we get into some of the do's and don'ts?
So really, they obviously don't need a license for recreational use. Sub 2 kilo category, they can operate in that excluded category range. Licensing really comes into play if you're starting to use the drone for commercial operations, or you want to start your own photography or multimedia type business, or if you want to then contract to another company, that say a surveying company or a mapping company, to do work with their systems, is really the first step of getting your pilot's license to do operation. And obviously, if you want to operate within 3 nautical miles of an aerodrome, then you need your pilot's license, you need your radio operator certificate, and then you would need to operate under someone's remote operating certificate.
And what about, to clarify, because again, if you read the regs and things, it's a little bit tricky, but the micro drone. So the Mavic Mini, for example, is your 249 grammer.
Yeah. Yeah.
How is that working as far as being able to fly it on a runway centre line and without even a AROC, without a license or anything? With
Yeah. I think it, I think that's a bit of a grey area where you still, in all honesty, got to look at, can you fly a drone? Obviously, approach and departure pass, no. You know, and obviously there's some good apps to click on to see if you can actually fly a drone within that area. But common sense has definitely got to prevail where you can fly close enough to an airport with those micro drones. That's always a see and avoid opportunity.
Yeah. Do you think it's clear enough for people? And do you think the education at JB Hi-Fi, Harvey Normal, wherever you buy your drone from, that people really understand?
Yeah, look,
I think we've all seen a drone flying something, like even
yeah,
just the open day, the pitch black flyby, someone had a drone up trying to
yeah,
shoot all
no,
the fighter jets flying through. And you're just like, what are you thinking?
yeah, no, I don't think it's educated enough in people that are buying drones or building drones in that category, and sadly it comes down to that risk versus reward approach from people, that are doing it. And I'd say a lot of them actually know they shouldn't be doing it, but they are. So
Yeah.
I'd say you probably have
Because I know
Yep.
I know the guy at Mindle Beach, when the flyby was going on, he was going off the app, which of course said you could fly there.
Yep.
Not taking into account the fact that obviously it wasn't appropriate with fighter jets zooming through.
Yeah.
But this is the mentality of some people, I guess, and what CAS is trying to deal with, and what us as educators are trying to deal with as well.
Yeah. Oh, look, I totally agree. And sadly, that's the real grey area of drones. And, and it's hard to educate the whole of Australia at one time, that any significant person within the population are going to buy a drone at some point and have a crack. But sadly, I think it's the people that really actually know the law that are breaking, at least some of the time, the law, or thinking that they can still fly their drone because they know where the aeroplane is, or,
well, I've had that at Hidden Valley. Unfortunately, Hidden Valley's right within, the 5.5 k's, 3 miles of Darwin Airport.
Yep.
So it's a micro mini only. But I get FPV people asking all the time, I'm licensed and all that. Can I, follow the drift cars? I said, mate, I'd love you to.
Yeah.
But the problem is we can't do FPV. We're within 30 meters of people. We're within the airport boundary. You should know that. And they go, oh, yeah. So even when they got themselves educated, it's still like they need the ticket to get jobs, but not necessarily comply within the work.
Yeah. And look, I think even from a younger age, we had an oval which was close to Jandakot Airport at the time, and we used to fly RC helicopters there, weekly, and it's that interaction now that I think there's just so much volume of people now with drones that you have to push the barrier back further, to protect that safe space that, common sense sadly doesn't prevail anymore, where people can safely operate, within that 3 nautical mile zone. There's just too many people.
Yeah. All right. So if someone buys a drone and they take photos and video stuff and then send it to the news or something to get used, does that then become commercial use? Is that something they need to consider, or are CAS not too fussed with that? It's more direct commerce.
Yeah, look, I think that's a grey area. It depends if they're getting paid for that media. I think it's really where commercial use. If you've got $1 for it, it's commercial. Or if you had even commercial value out of it, like YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, made a profit from showing it.
It makes it hard, doesn't it?
Yeah. And
all right.
one would hope if you're going down that road, you would be interested to learn the laws and do it as, professional as possible anyway. An REPL is pretty cheap these days, and, it's a very detailed course, and I think you can learn a lot of knowledge from even just systems and operations to procedures and, how to do things the right way.
All right. Well, what's a quick overview then? So if someone wants to do their basic drone license just for sort of personal sub 2 kilo use, which covers most Mavic Minis, Mavic Pros and the like. What do they need to do? What do they expect?
Yeah, so it's roughly a week's course. You can offer it a week in class or sort of 2 days, over a live Zoom conference. You get instant access to our learning management system and can go through the course, and there's quizzes along the way. So we roughly delegate sort of 2 days face to face to go through the course material, and then sort of 1 to 2 days worth of practical flight operations to get your 5 hours. We get a lot of people that come through the class that are sort of really good pilots to start with, so it's really going through and sort of critiquing their flying style and making it smoother, and giving them sort of elevated experience of what they're going to do really in the future. And what we see is the REPL sort of gives you the baseline knowledge of being a safe pilot. It
Mm.
doesn't give you the experience to be an in-tank asset inspection survey inspector or an offshore oil and gas drone inspector that's flying under hulls and around risers and legs. And probably that's where we see that the industry doesn't have the next level, and we've sort of gone and built some non-accredited courses for asset integrity inspection, and aerial surveying mapping courses to try and get pilots to that next level of flying really close to high value infrastructure, and what's the procedures to get away from things if you get into trouble. So going from the professional level of a drone pilot to say a commercial level of your CPL, we don't actually have anything in that range.
Yeah, there's no real commercial qualification, no
No.
anything yet. So is that something CAS is looking at, or is it just being really left to industry to use a bit of common sense and develop those skills?
Yeah, it's really being left to industry, and that's the hard thing I find being a perfectionist and sort of being in the industry for over 20 years. It's you know the best of the best all came from RC helicopters, because it
Mm.
was total manual, no gyros, no position hold. It was like you were the pilot, and it's do or die situations from the minute you take off. Um,
Well,
where
that was like, the very first drone I made was the DJI Flame Wheel, which is the custom made one there. But yeah,
yeah,
it was all thrust height holding. You couldn't just walk away like you can now, let go of the throttle and
yeah,
leave it alone. It would drift, it would drop. You'd have to keep picking up the altitude or a bit more power to get it back up. And really, I think it was very fortunate to have those foundational skills for sure, and a little
yeah,
bit of RC stuff that I had done beforehand.
yeah. And sort of the 5 years, the 5 hours gives you the minimum level normally to be able to go through the test and pass the practical. It
Yeah, it's
doesn't.
like the skipper's ticket, isn't it? It's the basics on boat operation, but by no means thorough, and it's just enough to keep you relatively safe and give you an idea where to start.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And should someone do a little bit of drone familiarization, drone flying, do you think, before they come to do the course? Or
100%.
is it, or is it 5 hours on the course is over and above anything they already hold?
Yeah. So the 5 hours, they can come to us with a logbook, their DJI log or a manual log that shows that they've got 5 hours prior. They still need to be able to pass the test, you know,
Hmm.
but they don't need to do an additional 5 hours. But normally we recommend to any new person, we normally get them set up with a simulator, like real flight sim, and get them doing some time on that while they're going through the course. And then
And of course, DJI's got a good little simulator that you can access. And
anything free these days that you can get a hold of. Um, and log some hours on the simulator, really trying to protect your orientations of flight. A lot of people, once the drone goes nose in, they really, get the left and right confused, and forwards now flying into you versus flying away. And
panic a
things get,
bit. Yeah.
panic sets in, and it's quick and easy to press the wrong stick and it's flying towards you.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it. It's one thing to fly it in with the mode all set that you can just let go and it'll stop. But when you go into sport mode or equivalent, and it starts to just wander and drift, and it gets a bit looser.
yeah,
But that's where we want to do the training in those modes as well, so you feel the confidence
yeah,
and do all the pirouettes and all the orbits and the maneuvers and fly away and fly the circuit the way we do. It's
yeah.
really good training, whether you're going to use that sort of handling again or not. It just gives you that confidence, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And even what we train, some of the maneuvers that we set up in our course, are dedicated for people that are going to be doing multimedia type work. All those nose in point of interest flights, holding altitude, holding it consistent, yaw rate, keeping the nose of the drone pointed on the center of the circle, so you can get those perfect cinematography type shots. But it's also really good drone practice because you need the dexterity in your fingers to coordinate all that to get the shot in the end.
Yeah, brilliant. And what about someone who's already a pilot, as far as the PPL theory and all of that goes, versus obviously the drone theory that's missing? How does that all work for someone who's interested?
Yeah. So like the great thing with the PPL or CPL guys, I mean, they already know, weather, they know aviation law. Um, they know a lot of the aviation, at least systems. So really the only thing that we change different, we go through dedicated drone REPL air law, which is just a little unit to add on to what you currently know. And then we'll go through the multi-rotor, if you're doing a multi-rotor system, go through all of their um, at least general components to familiarize yourself with the mechanics of a multi-rotor. And then we only have to build your 5 hours of flight time and go through the practical flight course. So it's a very quick transition.
Yeah, okay. And what about someone that might be interested in doing instruction and that sort of stuff? Is there formal qualifications for that, or is it more a competency based
So to become
thing?
a drone instructor,
Yeah.
yeah. So it is either TAE qualifications for training, or if you're a current flight instructor, so CPL flight instructor, um, are the minimum requirements now to be a drone trainer, or an instructor. And then obviously, I think it's 20 hours on type per system to be able to train on that aircraft.
Yeah, right. All right. So they've refined that a little bit more now.
Yeah, yeah, and they're now bringing in, obviously, the the CFI can now. There's going to be a chief, virtually a chief instructor, that's sitting below the CFI, that currently how it's positioned, because a lot of training organizations now have someone that's overviewing all the operations, but they're not actually constantly doing instructing. So there's another branch underneath the umbrella now for dedicated CFIs.
Yeah. Wow. All
Yeah,
right. But I think that's all good because again, like you say, we need to make sure if people are going to get taught, they get taught properly. If they're doing a course and then it's not being taught properly, well, then there's no point, and we're
yeah,
no better off than we were unregulated, pretty much.
that's true. And I mean, a couple of years ago, we had students come through our facility to do their 25 kilo ratings just as an upgrade. They just
Mm.
completed their 0 to 7 kilos with some other drone training companies. And, it was really actually sad to see they brought the manual of standards that had been delivered at that point in time. And it was like probably 40 pages at most, which was
Mm.
insignificant. And then we spent a whole day just trying to get them through the practical flight standards that we had, and they weren't competent to do that. So I brought them back a second day to do it free of charge, and still one person wasn't competent to do that flight. Um, Sadly, they have their REPL, and I think
Well, it's like anything, isn't it? It's the same as some schools do good jobs, others don't. I know there's some that just literally just fly around and flatten batteries until you reach 5 hours, but
yeah,
there's no actual skill sets or
no,
exercises happening at
yeah,
all, which is disappointing.
yeah. And our goal here, because we really started, nearly 20 years ago, 18 odd years ago, doing helicopter inspections with drones, so our passion is to be a perfectionist and to give our pilots the best skills to operate something sophisticated and put them in situations that they're going to be in real world, once they leave us, so that their standard when they've left us is higher than, really the basics of an REPL. Um, because we want to be able to virtually employ people after they've done our REPL course that we would want to employ.
Yeah, well, that's obviously the benefit of it, isn't it?
Mm,
All right. Well, what about when you want to have a bit of fun? Let's talk about the latest sort of almost firework replacer, isn't it? And drone sky shows and things. So do you want to talk to us about how you've got stuck into that and where the sort of the scope and size of the operation is, and then we'll talk about how you actually put together a show and things.
Yeah, definitely. So we sort of branched out into the drones light show business probably 2 years ago. Sort of a natural progression to what we were doing, developing drones and systems here, was to look at what other markets were opening up to do more drone work in, and we had a really good network of drone operators that we were looking to put more people on full time and grow the business. And drone light shows was really a novel and interesting business to roll out here. I was fortunate to be working, when I had TSA helicopters. I spent sort of 6 years on and off in Shenzhen in China, and have a really great network of friends there and businesses that were in the drone space. And one of those connections, was in drone manufacturing, in the light show business, and we partnered with them and did our first show a couple of years ago in Perth with 300 drones at the time, and it's sort of grown there to roughly 1,100 drones that we've got nationwide.
It's just massive numbers.
Yeah.
So all right. So how do you? First of all, I know that if I've got my own drone, I've got to jump on the CASA website and put in the serial number.
Yep.
How the hell do you do 1,100 drone registrations? Just you got someone to sit there and do that?
Yeah. So sadly, this is probably our one big pet hate at the moment with CASA is, we've got our receptionist that does our drone registrations, because you can only put 10 of them in at a time on the portal.
So you literally have to do them all like
I
do.
Yep. You have to do them
Unreal.
all. And sadly, this is where the legislation and CASA hasn't caught up with the industry. We too have to pay $40 per drone to register. So, 1,000 drones is over $40,000 a year just in registration fees, whether we use them one time or 10 times.
Far out. Yeah.
And we've been, notifying CASA for the last 2 years about, this is an issue and it's a hardship to all businesses in Australia. I think it probably costs less to register an Airbus A380 than it does 1,000 drones.
Oh, for sure. And this is the problem, isn't it? Like this industry is just growing at such a rate, and new applications are being found almost weekly. And you do feel for the FAA and CASA and all the agencies. I do get it. This is just a horse that's bolted and desperately trying to catch it.
Yeah. And that's the sad. It's still one person at the end of the day that's operating a computer or operating those drones. So it's really, in a way, shouldn't be treated as 1,000 drones in the air. It's one system. And I think the license should be a system license, not a per drone license.
Hopefully they sort that out soon.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you go about storing and charging and
so
controllers and
so each system for 500 drones has one remote control. So we have a mission controller that's looking after the computer side and managing the whole drone swarm. Then we have a backup pilot, so we call that pilot in command. And any drones that are having any issues, that pilot can flick the switch, or automatically the computer hands over control to the pilot, and they can then flick the switch to take manual control of that drone and fly it home. So if it's got a GPS loss or an EKF failure, those can be manually handled normally back to the takeoff location. And then roughly 500 drones will probably have 10 people as ground crew on the ground, setting the drones up, putting the batteries in, turning the drones on. And we roughly turn the drones on between 45 minutes to 30 minutes before the show, and it takes roughly 20 minutes to get the drones online and the flyer files loaded up and all your checks and balances done before you can take off.
And that's what I was going to ask, because typically some of those drones, they don't have the battery that long, or if they sit there, like the Mini, I know if I leave mine sitting there for too long, it starts to overheat and hasn't even done anything.
Yeah.
So how does all that get managed and still have enough battery to do a show with a reserve?
Yeah. So really we have
You must have
roughly
a lot
about,
of people to turn them on within a set time frame, don't you? Because
yeah, and that's why we do have for 500 drones, 10 people turning them on. We still sort of, if you're let's say a bit new to a mission control position, we'll turn drones on 45 minutes before the show. If you're a very experienced drone operator on the mission control side, you can get away with sort of 30 minutes, 35 minutes. But we still, even at 45 minutes, have enough battery capacity on board to do the 12-minute shows. But we do have another thing within the drone system that if for any reason we get delayed, that our flight gets pushed back, but all the drones are on, let's say due to weather, we can put all the
wind or
drones
something.
put the drones in a standby mode, which turns off virtually all the system except for the Wi-Fi module. So they virtually go to sleep except for the data link. And then they can sit there longer until we're ready to reinitialize them and take off for the show.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And so the computer is obviously controlling everything.
Yep.
How do you set up a show? I guess you've got some sort of authoring conductor software or something that
Yep.
you design the maneuvers, and then how the hell does that decide which drone goes where and when to turn the lights on and off and everything else to do all the effects?
Yeah, so we designed the show in a software called Maya, which is a animation studio software from Autodesk. Anyone that knows AutoCAD, the same company does the Maya software, similar to Blender.
Yeah.
Yep. So the drone show gets designed as a one-to-one show. We will go out and survey the takeoff location, give those RTK GPS coordinates to the design team. Then we'll show a position where the show is going to be. So the show will be designed exactly from the takeoff location to the show area as a one-to-one. And then as the artwork's created as a 2D or a 3D model, then our plug-in to Maya, we can then drop X amount of drone numbers onto that artwork, and it'll populate the drones around the wireframe, and then we can work through the lighting, codes just like we can any color for any artwork.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I guess, it's just controlling all that so it knows where they all are. So you don't really have too many dramas with in-flight collisions and things because it is all operating as one big swarm, like you said.
So we know that the max flight speed of our drones are 8 meters a second during operation. And they're limited to 8 meters a second because the maximum wind speed we can operate in is 8 meters per second also. So the drones are actually doing 16 meters a second in max speed. So it's actually, they're flying really quick.
Well, I've watched some of the displays and appreciate that's one's turning lights on and then they appear another, but they have actually gone quite a distance before they've come back on again. And I have been impressed by that. Yeah.
And this is why we sort of have, every 20 seconds, a new image, because it gives drones, virtually with the transition 10 seconds to get from where they were to where they need to be and establish to then turn the lights on for the next image. But those drones are flying at 8 meters a second there. And if we're on a windy day, their total speed is 16 meters a second.
Yeah, unbelievable. So with the animation stuff that we see, how much is it the drone moving up and down or left or right, or is it more an oscillation between drones and the lighting changing to create the animation?
Okay, a lot of the ones that we do, the drones are traditionally moving. So any of the snakes or any of the moving animals that we've seen or rockets that are taking off, there's a lot that are moving. Obviously, we try to use more drones if we can for artifacts that are stationary drones, then that are turning lights on for, say, the rocket thrust coming out of the bottom. And then we optimize
you have ones sitting below it that aren't lit up and then they illuminate and then go out again. So you've got a bit of vertical height. Yeah,
correct. Like the Royal Show, though, the combine harvester we did, the wheels were rotating, so they were going pretty quickly through that big circle of circumference. And the software also in the transitions, we do that very smart as well. We're not taking the furthest drone and telling it to go the longest way to get to the new spot. It's optimizing the closest drone to get to the next transition phase. And so drones are really shifting all around the sky to optimize where they need to be for the next piece of art.
Oh, fantastic. So you can obviously run a computer-based simulation to sort of test this, and it's pretty accurate as far as, or you really need to fire everything up and do it out in a field somewhere. And
Yeah, so we can simulate it in Maya with our plugin, and it will give us a complete analysis of speed as well, that no drone's exceeding its maximum speed. It'll give us a collision detection if any of the artwork has any colliding drones. It won't actually let us export it if any of those quality check errors fail. And then we have a second barrier. Once it's finished being designed in Maya, we put it into our ground control station, DGCS. And then we can also run a final check through there from the operator's side. But from our sort of company policy, we like to do an off-site demo of each show. Even though it's passed all the checks, we'll do a nighttime demo and show that to the client as well, what they're going to see for the event. And then some hard shows that maybe we haven't done a show at that location, we'll do an on-site test maybe 2-3 days before the show. And we normally allow one extra day for a weather event, so we can test on site and then for the show.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit nerve-wracking when you look at the forecast and you think, "Whoa."
Yeah, definitely.
especially in Perth, being one of the more windier cities.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, and have you had many dramas, or has it been a pretty reliable system? Or?
It's been very reliable. We did have obviously the one incident at Perth in EQ, Elizabeth Quay. This was probably early on in our development. The system was designed, and the spec sheet said that it could do a 500 meter communication link for RTK GPS. So the system runs on GPS, and as we know, GPS is probably accurate to 2 to 4 meters, at best. So we run a base station as well that's got another GPS sensor in it that we can then get real-time kinematic or very accurate GPS correction data. And that data is sent to all the drones over 2 data links, so a 2.4 and a 915 megahertz. And those data links were supposed to be secure for at least 500 meters of transmission. And we tested this show off-site, and we'd done the show the day before. So Friday night show went perfectly. And before the show, we send traditionally 1 drone up for a test. Then we'll send 5 drones up for a second test an hour later. And then the third hour later, we'll send 10 drones up and just check all the systems are operating on that day as we expect. And then Saturday night, we took off, show all went successfully. And then as the drones went out and got onto position, just probably halfway through their first bit of artwork, we started to see deviations in drones. And some of the RTK correction signals were dropping out on the mission control. And then it slowly progressed to get worse. And the hard thing, as we were trying to rebuild the system and turn RTK bases or data links on and off to see if there was one not working and why the other one wasn't in taking over to assess what's going on, the hard thing with the drone show is actually stopping it, because you can stop all the drones and pause them, but sending them home is very, very challenging. We have to send drones at, let's say, a 500 show. You've got to send
in
20
groups,
randomly. You've got to send 10, 20 home and see what happens, because the drones are going to come home at the shortest path, and you can't select drones in just one area and send them home. So you're randomly selecting drones, and there's definitely then a possibility that drones can cross paths and intersect and collide. So early on in the show, it was like we lost a couple of drones that had a mid-air collision, and then halfway through the show, it started to get a bit worse, but it was at that point still safer to keep the show going, even though it didn't look that nice as an artwork. And we were then on the ground trying to sort out what was going on with the RTK. And then sadly, slowly as it got closer to the finish of the show, more and more drones dropped out of the sky. And at that point, it's virtually a very difficult decision to stop the show because there's probably going to be a lot more that end up in the water.
Yeah. So what ended up being the cause? Was it people around and phones and other things, or?
It's very difficult to quantify because the weather and the humidity were very similar both nights, so we couldn't put it down to humidity, in a way interfering with the data links for that range. Our Wi-Fi scanning for RF was very similar. The second night was probably a bit higher, but nothing that we think the 915 shouldn't have been knocked out with. So really what we ended up doing is bringing shows back from a 500 metre range to 300 metres. And then our mitigation to that was to then not have our mission control and base station set up where the drones take off. We now establish mission control and all the base station data links at the furthest point from the takeoff spot to the show location. So the ground crew can then move any of the access points and the 915 data links. As they're taking off, they just walk those out then to the mission control area, which is closer to the show. And that's really mitigated and, ensured both backup data links are consistent.
Yeah, I guess it's all part of this pioneering, this new technologies, and it's just mind-boggling, and it's just such a spectacle. I know people just love watching it. So, mate, hats off to you, because as you were saying, you've got a setup in Perth, you've got a setup on the East Coast, and how you keep tabs on it all.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom. It's hard enough to keep my own GoPros and my drone charged up, let alone that size of thing.
I know. And we just put another 250 drones into New Zealand. So we had 2 shows there over the last month, and we've just done the largest drone show in New Zealand, at least at 201 drones. Done. Another little market we broke into.
Now, hopefully when I'm back down that way, mate, it's definitely something I want to observe and check out, because I've seen you on the Jerry and the guys on Instagram, and just I just still can't quite understand how you can do all that. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and definitely, if you come down and you can get involved, and the takeoff and landing phase is just amazing to see, sort of 500 drones and the noise, that close within 30 meters, during the takeoff phase. It really is the ultimate, nightclub experience.
Definitely. That's amazing, Nigel. Thanks, mate. Look, that's a really great overview of what you're doing there. And so for people that are interested in getting their license, are you only Perth-based, or how do people get in contact with you there? And then if they are interested in a drone show somewhere in Australia, how do they get in touch with you for that as well?
Yeah, so, we're virtually nationwide for drone training. So if they can get in contact, you can jump online with Autonomous Technology website, send us an email inquiry there, or you can automatically add your REPL and start straight away with our online learning management system there. Any questions, our contact numbers online, give us a call. We're happy to chat and talk you through what you might need, and assist whether you need an REPL or a remote operating certificate as well, running a business. And then drone sky shows, you can jump onto drone sky shows as well, and send in an inquiry form for any of the shows. Drop us a message on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and we're always happy to chat about any of those events.
Yeah, and as always, everyone, I will put all those links in the episode description, so they'll be easy to find for you.
Perfect.
All right, buddy. Look, thank you so much for joining me. It was a really great chat. Like I said, it's really fascinating stuff, and I can't even imagine where it's going. I guess soon they're going to be having little holographic projectors or something attached to the next, and be a whole nother level again. It'll just be one complete image or something.
Yeah.
But we'll have to watch this space. Drones with freaking laser beams or something.
Yeah, or even the world's biggest, LED screen. That we can all watch a movie with drones.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to get the batteries up a bit for that, I guess. But
yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. All right, Nigel from Autonomous Technology and Drone Sky Shows, mate, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure to have us. Thanks very much, Trev.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks, Nige. really great chat, and just some amazing technology there going into those displays, and hopefully some useful information if you've been thinking about getting a drone license. And I was talking to Nigel, obviously, after the episode when we finished recording, and I will be down in Perth in September, which just happens to be when the Perth Royal Show's on, and the guys will be doing a display every night. So I'm definitely going to be going along and joining in on the action, and definitely have to film some of that and talk to the crew and see a bit of the behind the scenes of how it all works. So I'm very much looking forward to that. All right, everybody, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, something a little bit different. If you are loving what you're hearing, please consider supporting me on Patreon. There's also an article on Patreon every week. It's free. All I ask is you just sign up for a free account. But if you'd like to support me and you're loving what you're doing, loving what I'm doing, you can do so by picking one of the subscription options. It's all tax deductible, and some fantastic content still to come. Until then, blue skies and light winds if you're flying your drone, and remember the golden rule: aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.